Okay, so the goal of the stream today is we're obviously a big Q&A. We've sent out a couple emails now, and we wanted to just take questions, as we know we've got a lot of them, especially since this partnership with CIG. So we wanted to make sure that all of your questions were answered. We also wanted to give you updates on some things that have been pending for a long time. If you've been with us since the day one Indiegogo campaigns, you know that there's like some shards that we offered back as part of that campaign, and even beyond that have been put on the back burner for quite some time. And I know that a lot of people want updates on that, so we'll be giving updates on that. We have some new stuff to talk about. We kind of want to talk a little bit about like what our relationship is with CIG, and the involvement that we're having with them and how that moves us forward. But I mean, that's kind of the goal here. We just want to keep everybody up to date and communicate as well as we can, because there's been a lot of questions over this transition period from when we went to our legacy shards, which was a completely different system, and we changed basically our entire architecture. That allows us to scale and allows us to tackle more games and tackle shards more rapidly. So there's a lot going on our end, and we want to make sure that everyone understands that, because it was a big transition, and I'm sure that there was a lot of questions and frustrations with it, but I promise it was for the better. It's for the benefit of everyone that we've transitioned to this new system that we're doing now. So do either of you guys want to add anything onto that?
I just add that, as Craig said, it's the planning and the thinking that goes into how we approach it, I suppose, over the long term has been something that we're trying to balance with getting people the shards that they're expecting in the shorter term as well. And we're trying to build a platform that makes it sustainable for us to produce the shards and lets us produce them a lot faster as we go. So whilst it might seem like we've been going a bit slow lately, and we have, it hasn't just seemed like it, we have been going a bit slow with that stuff, it means we can go substantially faster kind of from here on out. So it's been tricky kind of balancing that platform development stuff with the producing of the shards, but we hope that a lot of the new shards will come a lot quicker now.
Exactly. So actually, let's dive in basically right away to. A lot of people here because of the announcement with CIG itself. So, Andy, why don't you talk a little bit about how that came about? I guess because actually, let me take you back a year and a few months to where we released a birthday video of us telling you basically what we had in store, and then at the very end, we cut out a bit that said we had a big announcement to make, and we just had to wait on it. And Andy, why don't you take it over from that point forward?
So it's been a really interesting one as we've kind of worked through how we deal with the announcement. So the way it all came about is we were at CitizenCon in Manchester, the last live CitizenCon they had, and it was an amazing opportunity to meet so many of the people in the community, and other, not just people that play the game, although that was awesome as well, but meet some of the other content creators and some of the people involved in some of the other really cool projects that happen. We met the guys that run Daymar and Hurston Hurtlocker, and people produce these incredible 3D models, and this amazing ecosystem of people that were creating this incredible content for the game. And all the people who played the game, and seeing all of that passion, and all the developers that we got to talk to as well, as they came by and kind of had a look at all the different booths and were talking to everybody. And I remember we were just next to one of their Star Citizen booths where they were kind of running sessions about how they built 3D models, in-game models for different things. And we got to talk to some of those developers during those sessions, and afterwards, these developers would be floating by. And through a couple of introductions from different community people and from different developers, we started to have some conversations with some of the more senior kind of business-ish oriented people at Cloud Imperium, and we were thrilled at the time to hear that so many of the developers there had used GameGlass and knew about us. And the conversation started to turn to how could we use GameGlass and make GameGlass something that potentially could have a bigger impact on how people played Star Citizen. So that was kind of the genesis for beginning some of these discussions with the Cloud Imperium about a partnership. And it evolved from there over the next couple of months after everyone got home and had a chance to kind of think things through. And we got to a stage where, we signed an agreement with them to use their intellectual property and to start kind of, baking ourselves a little bit more into the game. And the agreement kind of lets us see what they're doing with the game, where, they're very much building the game that they are building. They've got, as anyone who does any game development knows, building a game is a hugely complex endeavor. Any game, let alone a game of the ambition and the size and the scale that the Cloud Imperium is building with Star Citizen. So they've got a massive machine that is building this game, and we're a very, very tiny sort of speck in that machine. So we get to see what they're doing, but obviously, they've got their focus and they've got their priorities. But what we do get to do is we get to hear about some of the things that are coming up. We get to hear about, the things that they like about what we're doing, and potentially some of the things they think that we might be able to contribute to as well in the future. So we had to kind of wait until we got the agreement sort of settled, and then we had to wait until we got our platform and our technology to a place where we could build the shards that we all had the ambition to create, for the vision that us and Cloud Imperium had for what that experience could be. And we went through a couple of iterations of what they looked like from a visual perspective and a user experience perspective before we settled on kind of where we are now. And that whole process just takes time. And I suppose I mentioned, the massive machine that Cloud Imperium has for building the game because, we need to be very respectful of their primary focus, and it's building the game that we all want to enjoy. It's not, pushing and working with us. They've got a game to make, and if we can help them in some way, then we can do that. But we don't want to distract them, and they don't want to be distracted from building our game that we all want to play, as I say. So, finding a way to sit in with them in a graceful, sort of non-intrusive way, it was always been our priority. So it's taken a bit of time to get our platform going, to find a way to work with them in a non-intrusive way, to get the visuals to where we want them, to get the user experience to where we want it. And all of that took time. And all of that time we were sitting on this announcement that we had this partnership, that we had this thing that we're working on. But we didn't want to talk about it until we had something really concrete to show. We didn't want to talk about it until we had the shards to show off, until we had the visuals to give people, until we had the list of shards for this first set that we could talk about. So we kind of sat on it for a really long time. And it was difficult to sit on it because we wanted to talk about it, but we really felt like we wanted to wait until we had something really concrete to show everyone off. And getting all those dominoes to line up until we were there took a long time. Took a few months, more than a few months.
Yeah, if you put it into CIG terms, basically we were doing the same thing, where we're building our technology in order to be able to scale, and that's exactly what they're doing with all their technology as well. They're laying that groundwork in order to create something amazing at speed and scale, because doing it by hand is just not a smart way of doing it. And the way we were doing our shards before, like the legacy shards for both Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen, was not scalable. It took massive effort to get those shards done. And then not only that, but it took forever to make them look decent on different devices. And then there was also the issues with, if you wanted your phone in landscape mode, and that was one of the big complaints we had. Now, it doesn't matter the way we're doing our scaling. It just doesn't matter anymore because of the technology we've built. So not only have we got our technology to the point where we built every single Star Citizen shard that you see now with 3 variations each in a week and a half, we were also able to release a platform where people can create their own things. We were able to release a marketplace where you can go and you can find other people's creations, add them to your library. We were able to create a brand new experience when it comes to the actual tablet and the phone. When you go onto it and you select your collection, it shows how many shards you have in that collection, and everything on top of that. It's been a lot of stuff, and it's taken a lot of time, but we really feel we're on the precipice of something really special. So it's exciting times for us, for sure, and we're really happy that you all are here and supporting us. And I mean, some of you guys have been around from the SC pad days, and I know there's like a few of you that probably know what that means, but it's been a long journey, and we couldn't be more thankful. So
I think just before we move on, I think just to give everyone a little bit of perspective, because Craig mentioned something interesting there, that we built the Star Citizen shards in a week and a half, and I want to add just a little bit of detail around that, about just giving that some context, and then kind of showing, I suppose, that as Craig was again talking about the difference in speed from the old way we used to make shards and what this new way kind of means. And hopefully that will give everyone a bit of an idea of why the Forge was so important for us, and why this new method, whilst it took some time to create this set of technology, it really is going to make things so much faster in the future. So when Craig says it took a week or so to build some shards, what he means is once the components were in the Forge, and we use the Forge to build shards as well. We've kind of got a bit of a developer version of it, but we use the same technology to build shards. So once all of those components are in the Forge, it's really, really quick for us to build a shard. So absolutely, it takes a week or so to build that whole collection of shards. But before that, we still have to do the visual design for each of the components, do the usability for how those individual buttons and toggles work, and then do the layout for each of the shards. What does the aviation shard have on it? What does the combat shard have on it? And that takes much, much longer. That's the process of designing how those products work and how they feel to work, and how they help you play the game. Yeah. And that takes a lot longer, and that's some of what obviously Cloud Imperium was involved in as well. Making sure that from a look and feel perspective, it worked for them, and they were happy with how it connected with the game. I felt like it was connected with the game. So the process of actually building them, yes, is super quick. The process before that of doing all the visual design and the user experience design, that takes an amount of time, and it is very variable. Sometimes it goes quick, sometimes it goes slow, but even then it's far faster than what it used to be in the past, where it would literally take us months to build a shard, even after we'd done all the visual design side of things. So once we get later on to start talking about some of the new games and some of the new shards coming along, hopefully that gives you some idea of, whilst the process of designing a shard might take some time, once we get that design out of the way, it is so much quicker for us to build those shards. And all of the things we use to build those shards, that same tech goes into the Forge for you guys to use to build and customize your own shards in the future as well.
Exactly. All of that. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing the most of the visual design. I guess I failed to mention that takes a significant amount of time to make sure that that's all up to snuff. So, okay, so let's move on to, let's see here. Just looking at our agenda.
So shall we talk a little bit about kind of what this partnership sort of means, and how deep it goes, what it might mean for the future, and what potentially it allows us to do for some of the shards coming up?
I mean, we should just address one thing right away, because we've had about 19 questions that have said the same thing. So we've had, yes, there's a dog in my room. We've had multiple people ask us, and to be honest with you, I think I asked this 3 or 4 times before we started GameGlass. The main question is, of course, are we working with them on creating an API? And we get why that's such an asked question, because it would make everything simple. The fact is, our relationship is still in very early stages, and they're still a big company, and we're still learning how to work with each other. So we're taking baby steps, really. We don't want to overstep our bounds, and I'm sure that they want to see how everything goes as well. So right now we're kind of, we've done the designs, we've released the shards, we're gauging user feedback and everything like that. And as far as an API goes, we want it as much as everyone else does. We've had initial conversations with CIG about it. I can't really go into any more detail than that. But we definitely want it. They know everyone wants it. But I think that's pretty much all we're allowed to talk about at this point, unfortunately. So as much as I'd love to give you a concrete answer, yes, we're building an API with them, we can't do that. So I'm sorry to let you all down, but that's kind of where we're sitting right now. And in the future, as things grow, I would imagine that those talks will accelerate. But for now, they're just we're just going slowly and surely. So I just wanted to address that. Yeah.
I'll stress something that that Cloud Imperium definitely is aware that everyone wants an API, and they see the benefit of it, both for us and for other peripheral makers as well, and for everybody who plays the game. So they're very aware of it. They absolutely can see the benefit of it. And as with everything, it's just a matter of sort of slotting it into to their priorities. So, we're hopeful it will come down the road, but rest assured that they like it as well, and they want to do it, and they know that everyone else wants it, as Craig said. So, we're hopeful that it'll come down the road.
Yeah, and I mean, so we can do what we can do now, and for us, initially our thoughts on toggle states, and this is one of the big reasons why people want an API is, I mean, there's two reasons really, is making sure everything's synced up for one, and the second would be getting data or anything from the game and then displaying it on your tablet. So there's really two main reasons there. Usually we are against toggle states if it means that it's easily able to be desynced, but that was more so before we had Forge technology, where we could have fallbacks basically, and we wanted to create the infrastructure now in order to have those toggle switches when hopefully we do get that technology and we are able to integrate something like that. That will obviously be our plan with Elite Dangerous when we eventually merge the legacy shards to the new ones. It won't just be here's a toggle switch on the Forge, it will be here's a toggle switch on the Forge that reads the data from the status JSON file, and it's actually synced up with the game. And obviously we want to do exactly the same thing with Star System and with every game that we tackle. I mean, it just makes it so much better of an experience for everybody, more consistent. So, yeah.
And APIs are an interesting topic, I suppose. There's a lot of different things that an API gives us. As Craig mentioned, one of those is knowing the state of a ship or knowing the state of a character. If we know that the doors are open, if we know that your lights are on or your landing gear is down, then we can use that to drive the state of a toggle for those things. But we've got some plans for helping with things like toggle state persistence across shards that don't require an API. So there's some things that an API absolutely helps with, but that we can do at our end as well, even without that. So, we'll get down later on. We'll talk about persistence as a topic for shards, but we definitely see an API as about, yes, knowing the state of things, but enriching the data and what a shard can do is a really big topic for us as well. So you've seen hints of that in Elite Dangerous, being able to show the name of the ship you're in or the name of the system you're in. So being able to pull in some of that rich data to make the shards more sophisticated is a big priority for us for the future. And that's something that we're looking at doing with more of our shards for more games as we go in the future as well. And we're really dependent on the games and what data they give us. And, even if a game doesn't have an API as such, sometimes they have files that we can read or other sources of data we can have access to. So it does get a little bit tricky, and it is, as I say, really dependent on each individual game. But that's a big theme that we want to try and push on, for next year, is how can we make our shards richer and more sophisticated and have a bigger impact on how you play beyond just the keybind aspect of it.
Exactly. Yeah, so let's move on to the next topic. This is a great one. So how launch went and what went into these shards. So launch was a mixed bag. Andy, why don't you go over launch a little bit?
So launch. We learned a lot from doing this launch. We're still a relatively small team, and we've always been remote and we've always been global. So we have, for some context, I'm in Australia. Craig's in Canada, Chad's in the States. We've got another couple of developers in the States, and then we've got another developer in the Netherlands and another one in Italy. So we're all over the world. And this launch really had a lot of big pillars to it. In addition to the shards themselves, it was the marketplace, And then in addition to the marketplace, it was using that marketplace as a way to distribute the shards and connect and have that distribution connected to your GameGlass account and which shards you kind of essentially had permission to use. And along with all of that came this new concept of variations for shards or variants for shards, where we wanted to have a combat shard as the thing, but we also wanted to have within that combat shard, we wanted to have a variant for mobile phones, or one for this aspect ratio of tablet, or for a different aspect ratio of a tablet. And that was kind of our way of helping those be a bit more visually responsive or fit from a layout perspective a little bit better for those devices. So there were a lot of really big things that went along with that launch. And I think one of the things we learned was perhaps for the future, not having so many different things launching at the same time. So that was definitely a big thing that was part of that release, trying to coordinate the shards with all those other pillars. But for the shards themselves, I think we had some really interesting learnings about, from a feedback perspective, and we'll get to maybe some of that separately. But the launch itself was really useful for us, seeing how people reacted to the marketplace, seeing how we dealt with that really complex rollout of these big capabilities, these big pillars. So we've definitely taken a lot of learnings as a team about how we structure these product and feature releases. And then we certainly have a lot of individual specific pieces of feedback about the shards themselves. But the release, largely went well, but it definitely wasn't as timely as we would have liked. And we've definitely seen some of the bumpiness in some of the features and how people experience and how some of the details for those features kind of rolled out. So we think we definitely takes a bit more time in the future to polish the experience for each of those features in the future as well.
Yeah, I think with any launch with a deadline like that, you're crunching to get the technology to a place where it works well for everybody. But unfortunately, sometimes that means the UX and the design that really helps users navigate the application itself gets left behind. And we've definitely noticed that. We're doing the best we can to remedy it, because it was a big shift. And a lot of people are wondering, hey, where's the legacy shards? Or they have no idea that they can go to the My Shards thing on the host to see all the shards they have and then go and edit every single one of them. And that's specifically a UX problem that we absolutely intend on addressing as soon as possible.
And that's our big focus for the next couple of months is polishing all of these features, polishing the Forge, polishing the marketplace, making it easier for people to find components in the component library, making it easier for people to know how that integration between the Forge and the My Shards dashboard and the app, how all of that works. So we're really trying to consolidate on that polish and that user experience over the next couple of months before we do any sort of bigger platform features. And that's kind of separate to some of the stuff coming from a shards perspective for new games, but that polish aspect is definitely our priority over the next couple of months. And we'll get to some of that, some of those improvements that we've looked at soon.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the next topic is like some of the issues that we faced, and one of them is obviously when we made the announcement that we were partnering with CIG, the amount of traffic was ridiculous, and it took our servers down, and I never thought that would happen to us. I thought we would, for some reason, be immune to that, but we were unfortunately part of that as well. So our servers went down. So we definitely apologize for that. And then, the confusion on the marketplace, again, that's just a UX issue that we're having right now. And once everybody knows how it works, it's not going to be a problem moving forward, because this is the way that we're going to be doing everything moving forward. And we foresee a future where a lot of it is taken off the website, though. So you download GameGlass as the host application, and then everything you do based on around your account or around purchasing or around finding shards or anything like that is actually all done in the host software, and it doesn't need to be done on the website anymore. So there is going to be a centralized location for that, and we've already started working on designs and how we want that to look. It's just, unfortunately, that's not top priority right now. We want to get more content to everyone as we scale up. So we're going to focus on that first, polish UX where we can, and then, eventually branch into optimizing the host and making that just a whole better experience. So So there was definitely some issues when we launched the new shards with the brand new technology. The main ones are absolutely shard navigation. We quickly did our best to fix that by adding a couple buttons, but we are well aware that that is not enough. So actually, why don't I just show everybody kind of what we're working on for that? Shard navigation is one of the biggest issues we're having right now, and we hear you loud and clear. We are absolutely listening to feedback, and like I said, we got the 3 buttons done, but we want a more expandable and scalable approach to this. So we actually have something probably coming next week that at least addresses the immediate issue here. So let me just go.
While Craig gets that up and going, I think I'll just have a quick chat about sort of the latency and the performance issues, which are very much entwined. So there are a couple of things that we were seeing with that, and they are very much dependent on the device you are using to access your shards. And in the area or the specific area in which you are seeing that latency. So the 2 big ones there were the speed of switching between shards, or from one shard to another shard, or from a shard back to the collections and then to a shard, and the responsiveness, or the feeling of responsiveness for the individual buttons and toggles and sliders themselves. So we've been improving, and there are very different solutions for each of those things as well, and the degree to which you'll feel the impact of those, again, will kind of come back to the device you're using too. That's been something that we've really tried to improve on. So there's some changes that went live last week and some more this week that improve both the speed and the responsiveness of switching between shards, and the snappiness and the smoothness of using the individual components, toggles and buttons themselves. So hopefully those are feeling better for people, and it's something that we, again, as we do more visual design work on these, and as we, look at new ways to implement them into the Forge, which is what we use to build the shards, we're hoping to keep improving kind of that performance aspect of the individual shards themselves as well.
Yep. Yeah. So let's dive into this. So I've got it up here. Let's do this. Okay. I think everyone should see my screen now. And let's just double check. Yeah. Looks like we're good. Okay. So this is the idea we have for, we would call this, I guess, shard navigation 1.0. The solution we're trying to derive from this is something that is scalable in the future and customizable in the future. But we wanted to get something up ASAP that allows you to navigate between shards quickly instead of having to go back to your collections. And we think that this is a good solution. So I'll just play the video real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see here that when you click on the GG nav, this button up here in the top left, we're going to have a slide out. It'll show you your premium shards, your community shards, and your personal shards. Obviously, when you click on one of the premium shards, there's 3 variations. And this is where it gets into customizability at some point, where we're going to talk about, if you only want to show one variant on a specific device, you could do that. Or if you only wanted to show premium shards, or you only want to show a couple premium shards and maybe 2 community shards or something like that. It's really scalable in that way. So we wanted to offer a solution in the short term, which would be to show everything that you currently own and then give you the option of selecting a different variant in case you're using multiple devices. So when you click on the shard name, it'll drop down the different variants here, and you can select one of those. So you'll see here in the video, and it almost instantly loads now. So there was a lot of fixes we made to our WebRTC connections in order to allow that. And there's still some optimizations to make here, but you can see that this is kind of the idea that we have in mind in order to have an easy way to navigate between shards without having to go back to your collections and then maybe scroll through a couple pages to see all the shards that you have. So we think this is a good short-term solution.
The thing about this is that, as Craig said, it's really scalable for us as we move, as we add more shards, as we add, and as everyone builds a larger collection of shards as well. We really wanted to make it easy for you to switch between however many shards you have, because some people might just have a couple, but some people might have a lot more than that. So we tried to build a solution for this so I suppose this way of solving it that would help both of those kinds of users. So it really is about something that is scalable, that helps users with large and small collections of shards. The buttons that we added to the top of the shards, they were really about trying to solve for people, how do I really quickly move between a small number of very specific shards. This is really about how do I move between a very variable number of shards, and as I said, large or small. So quite different solutions, but both designed to help people switch between things. And this method lets people move between those shards without having to go back to their collection entirely, and they can kind of do that from within the shard themselves. And as Craig said, as we go through and we polish this, we can look at ways to make it more customizable for people, look at ways to add potentially thumbnails and artwork and other things to make it feel a little bit more immersive. But we really wanted to try and find that really scalable kind of way to do it that we could grow upon and build upon for the future.
Exactly. So there's a couple other points in the issues that we've faced, the immediate issues that we've faced since we launched and we're now using this new technology. There's actually quite a few, but I'm only going to talk about a couple today. So then performance was a big deal. Obviously, switching between shards was a performance problem. People saw 3, 4, 5 seconds of loading time. That's been fixed, and it should roll out maybe tomorrow. We typically don't like to push things on Fridays. If it's not tomorrow, it would be on Monday, and that's what you just saw in that video, almost instant shard switching. Another issue is the versioning of shards, and this is probably going to actually tackle a couple of questions that we have anyways, but we are well aware that the current setup is not ideal for how we're dealing with we call them source shards, and that just means that we've created a shard, and whenever somebody imports it from the marketplace, it becomes theirs, and it's not connected in any way to the source shard. And we are well aware that that is an issue, and as we get further along, it's going to become more and more of an issue. We have some short-term ideas on how we want to tackle that, mostly being around showing a version number of a shard, specifically when we update that shard, updating the version number, and then when you load that shard in the Forge, it would show an updated version saying you have to update. And in an ideal world, you wouldn't have to update anything. It would take all of your actions and everything, and it would just apply it to the new version of the shard. But unfortunately that's a really large technical hurdle. So what we're thinking instead is we will do a sort of versioning system, and then what we really want to tackle is a way to export your actions and then be able to re-import them back into the shard if you re-import it from the marketplace. So you're not losing any of that work that you've done, and you're keeping all your changes. It's just you're having to do a little bit more manual work there. So we are well aware of that issue, and we are going to tackle it. There's a lot of priorities we have right now, and that is one of them, but a little bit further down the list than some of the other ones. And then that kind of brings me into the next point, which is persistence. And persistence we absolutely know is an issue. We had an early version of it working properly, but it's probably too long of a discussion to have on this live stream, but persistence ties into really what we want to do with the future of GameGlass, which is really expand the Forge tool to be something on par with, if there's any designers out there, Figma for shards, basically. And creating persistence means we need to create a well-rounded component structure where instead of just adding a button and then somehow saving the state of it in your cache or cookies and then switching to a shard and then coming back to that shard and having that state persist, that's not a great way of doing it. Instead of doing that, we would have a button that you can assign as a component and then use that component on multiple different shards, and then it's just one thing and it would update no matter where you are or what you're doing. So there's a lot of stuff we would like to optimize there. It's just that's a very long discussion we would need to have, and that ties into a whole other branch of issues, especially things like navigation, where having a componentized structure for navigation allows you to use a navigation component customize it to your will, and then potentially have multiple different navigation components. Maybe one for community shards. Maybe you wanted to create a component navigation menu that looks a certain way for Star Citizen shards. So there's all kinds of stuff we can do. It's just a matter of priority, and we want to tackle them right. So we're doing what we can right now to solve immediate problems, but those really long-term problems we want to solve in a very logical way that allows us to really put out the best product we can. So I hope that kind of answers that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it kind of goes to some of our development philosophy for GameGlass and the Forge is where possible what we want to try and do is instead of solving one very specific problem, we try to create a tool that lets us or you solve that problem, but also use that same tool to solve any similar problem. And what we talk a lot about is the balance between providing a really flexible tool that perhaps needs a little bit more instruction or awareness about how to use that tool versus providing kind of out of the box solutions to, narrower problems that you can just kind of pick up and use. So, one of the things we'd love to hear about, I suppose, is more feedback on that. We talk a lot about, whether we should build a component that is already bundled together to work a certain way, or whether we should build a component that is a bit more open and flexible and lets you customize that component in a larger way. So if anybody has feedback about what they would like to see and how they would like to see us create those components, whether you want something that's really flexible, but perhaps you have to dive into the details for how to make it do what you want it to do, or whether you would like something that's a bit more pre-configured out of the box, let us know. Talk to us on Discord, send us an email. We're always really keen to hear about sort of those thoughts from you guys, because we have a lot of debates about that as well. We're always trying to balance that flexibility versus ease of use aspect to it. But more powerful components using the Forge is definitely something we try and do where possible.
Exactly. All right. So the next topic is, I'm sure, one that's a lot of people are looking forward to. The next topic is Ship Databank and Discover. So I know that this has been obviously a long time coming. We've wanted to talk about this for a long time, and the main reason we were really silent about it this year was because we were actually told to put it off. When we talked to CIG originally, the Ship Databank and Discover shards were still in conception. And we hadn't signed anything with them, and that took months and months to get all that done. But they wanted us to hold off on that just due to IP licensing and making sure that if there was a licensing agreement signed, then that kind of changes how philosophically we would tackle these different shards. There's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo that goes into that, that we don't really need to get into. But not only that. So we couldn't really talk about it for that reason. We were told not to. And then as we were developing our technology, we were really trying to accelerate, obviously, how to build shards with the Forge, but how we're going to tackle Star Citizen and deal with not only what we're doing right now, which is just the keybind methodology, but, the bigger picture stuff, which is something very unique in the space where we're talking about more data integrations, and we're talking about displaying stuff that's not just buttons. And philosophically, it's a very difficult challenge for us to overcome. So, Andy, why don't you talk a little bit about where we're at with Ship Databank, where we're at with Discover, and then maybe just go into what we plan on doing with them, because that's a burning question.
So yes, this is an interesting one. So one of the interesting things that we try and do as we talk to developers, and we've had, obviously, we've got this partnership with Cloud Imperium, which is amazing, and we've had other conversations with other game developers as well. And one of the things that they highlight and that we are always trying to do is, and especially as we start to build these partnerships and build these relationships, is we need to be respectful about their vision for the game. And whilst we might think a shard or an experience is really useful and really cool, what we need to try and do is to make sure the shards we're producing, if we're doing them in partnership with them, really connect with what their vision for the game is. Because at the end of the day, it's their game, and they're making the game that they're trying to make, and they're making it for us to play it, but they're making what their vision is. So that's a really high priority for us, is to make sure that we're in sync with their goals. And that was, I suppose, one of the pieces of feedback that came from Cloud Imperium when they looked at all of the shards, and we went through all of the shards that we had produced and all of the shards that we planned to produce. And we can talk about some of those a little bit later on as well. But the two that they highlighted for us were the ship databank and the Discover shard. And for different reasons, they asked us, and it was very much a conversation. They're amazing to work with, and they're not demanding at all. But one of the things they asked us to do was to hit pause on those two shards for quite different reasons. So let's maybe tackle Discover first, because that's the tricky one, in that we did a lot more work on that one than the ship databank shard, but the end point for that one, I think, is a little bit different to where we're going to end up with the ship databank. So for Discover, for them, they really liked the idea behind it, and for us, the intent behind that shard was to not be a shard that was about controlling the game. It was very much a shard that helped you discover and surface and find things to do in the game. And for a game as broad and as wide and as deep as Star Citizen, that's actually really helpful to have, because perhaps a user comes along to play the game and they don't know that a wreck is explorable. They don't know that a shop over there is really amazing to go and visit, or they don't know that this is how you hack to reset your crime stat. So that it helps users find and those different things to do, which is really cool. But they were getting really deep into how some of those pieces of content worked. So that was one of the things that they asked us to pause on, just because they didn't want sort of these things to get out of sync. So Discover, we did quite a bit of work on. We've got the visual design done for it, and we've actually got the platform for all of that content done behind the scenes. But the way that shard would work is that we would not be producing the content for it. We'd be working with content creators on YouTube or on Twitch who would decide they wanted to cover or make a video about some of these really cool things to do in the game, and then essentially kind of break it up into steps that could be used within the Discover shard to kind of step through how to do that thing that they were wanting to talk about. So we had some really amazing discussions with some incredible content creators, and they actually started to produce some really great content for it. We've got it in our back end, in our admin platform, the support for that shard, but it's a tricky one for us to do, because the content it's easy for that content to get out of date because the game itself is moving so quickly, and we need to make sure we have a way of sort of managing and moderating that content as well, for people to flag when it's inaccurate or it's out of date, or there is something wrong with that content. It perhaps doesn't fit with the game or with our platform, or there's this, God forbid, something offensive about it. So there's a lot of tricky issues that come along with the Discover shard. So for all of those quite complex reasons, that's one of the shards that we're actually going to hit a bit more of a pause on, and really kind of go back and think about how that shard would work with Star Citizen specifically, but also how it would fit into the other games we want to support as well, and how we can make it as easy as possible for content creators and other people to create the content that goes into it, those Discover steps, and how we can make it really easy for you as a user to discover those cool things inside the Discover shard, but also how we can kind of moderate and maintain the quality of the content in that shard as well. Because it was very much designed as a shard that wouldn't just be about Star Citizen, it would be a shard that had content in it for any game that you played. So that was the first of what we used to call a meta shard that was about something you could use in multiple games. So it's a complex one, and for that reason, given that we kind of really want to focus on some of the other things that we feel are a bit more impactful for Star Citizen and for GameGlass generally, what we've decided to do is hit pause on the development of that one. It's not going to go away completely, but it won't be at the top of our priority list like some of the other shards that we'll talk about today. So we're going to hit pause on that one for now, and we'll come back to it when we've got a better approach to the content and the usability of it, and kind of where it sits in our set of products. and we will have some ways we can kind of, for those that are really looking forward to it. And, I should have prefaced all of this by saying that you all have been incredibly patient with the ship databank shard and with the Discover shard as well. Incredibly patient in buying them, pre-sale kind of really early to help support us, which we're so grateful for. So we know you guys have been hugely patient for it, for both of these shards. But for this one, as I said, we're going to hit pause on it. And we will shoot an email out after this live stream to talk about how we're going to give something back to those people who've bought that shard, to make it up to you for the people who are really looking forward to that shard specifically that we're going to hit pause on, to make up for the delay in us sort of hitting pause on that development for the time being.
Yeah, and I just want to be absolutely clear by saying we mean hitting pause on it. We have no plans at the current state of GameGlass, of where we're at as a company and where we're at with our philosophy and how we want to tackle things in the future. We have no plans on tackling this anytime soon. So it's when we say pause, but it could be, we can't give an ETA on when we would get. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. We might look back at this in a year. It might be more. It might be less. It's really hard for us to say. We have a lot of really important pressing priorities that we need to tackle, and for our philosophy and how we want to tackle these things and how we want to branch out and how we want to tackle this partnership with CIG. It's unfortunately put Discover really far down the ladder of things that we've trying to prioritize. Like Andy said, we had it almost ready for release. We had all the back-end integrations done. Content creators had already created dedicated videos specifically for Discover. And, everyone was really excited for it. But, once we switched everything over to the new Forge technology, we don't really have everything set up now in order to do all of those data integrations. All of that has to be done again from scratch in order to work with the Forge. So it's an entire massive undertaking, because that's really how we see GameGlass in the future. Is it's not just about buttons. It's about taking data from somewhere. It's about having custom data structures. It's about all of this stuff that we can do, all these integrations we can make, that not just with games, but with all kinds of stuff, like your smartwatches, or you see these lights behind me. I could integrate with those. There's a whole bunch of stuff we could do, and all of this data integration stuff kind of goes into one bucket, and we just haven't had the resources to tackle it yet. So we do apologize that it's taking this long for us to address it. It's been kind of a sore spot, because it's something we were passionate about. We really wanted to tackle it. It just doesn't make sense at this time. So we wanted to be upfront and just let you guys know that that's the down low. It's going on pause for the immediate future, and however long it needs to be going on pause for, but we will be sending an email to address it. And then ship databank. Ship databank is a little bit different. So there's a couple issues with ship databank. Not only do we need to solve the data problem, but the big problem, and we've actually talked to CIG about this too. The big problem with ship databank is that there's not a great source of truth for the data. And all you Star System players know this very well, that their ship matrix is completely out of date, and they know it. We know it, they know it, everyone knows it. So figuring out a way to give you information that is of the present instead of whenever the last time they updated it was, is something we need to tackle still. And then we also need to decide on whether or not we want to deal with, maybe it's more of a community strategy. So users are able to report if something's not correct, and then we're able to update it. Or, there's a bunch of different ways of tackling that shard. But there's also different ways of tackling it in case we do end up getting an integration with Star Citizen, where if you targeted a ship, an enemy ship, maybe it would give you the information of that ship, how many hard points it has, some basic information about it on GameGlass, instead of you don't get that information really when you're looking just through the ship HUD. So there's a few different ways we'd like to tackle it, and we need to make sure that we're tackling it from the right direction, because we still think it's a very beneficial shard, especially for new players. There is a plethora of ships and starses, and I mean, I have trouble keeping up with it. I'm sure all of you do too. If someone knows all the sizes of hard points on all the star citizen ships, I applaud you. Well done. But most people will not know that. So it would be very handy to have, and we still absolutely do want to tackle this one. We think it's much easier to tackle the ship databank shard than it is Discover, which is much more big data, whereas the ship databank is more confined. So that is still one we want to absolutely do. It's just, again, it's going to go on the back burner, but it's a little bit higher. It's definitely a higher priority than Discover, because I think that's like a really beneficial shard that actually lets us lay the groundwork of that data integration technology we've been talking about. And do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting things you mentioned there that I think we'll just dive into a little bit quickly. So Craig talked about data shards there. So that's again a little bit of a different type of shard to what we've been tackling generally until now. So most of our shards at the moment are really about keybinds and commands and controls, and there's a ton of shards, really amazing shards we can make in that area. But these data shards are much more about information and content and references that you can use that help you play the game rather than actually controlling the game. And that's just very much a step for us towards, making GameGlass a platform that is not just about controlling games, but about how you play games and how you experience games. And it's going to be, a lot of capabilities that help play games in really different ways and in very, very different games too. So these data shards are something that we really want to tackle in a much larger and more sophisticated way. So the databank shard is a really great example of that one. I think that one we've got much more kind of concrete plans on. We want to use that as a bit of an entry point into this new type of shard. We want to build an architecture that lets us use and create these data-based shards, not database shards, but data-based shards, across our entire platform for many different games and in many different use cases. And at the same time, tackling things like, user-to-user communication, being able to use a shard to send something to a shard with another GameGlass user. So there's a lot of things we want to tackle with that set of capabilities, and the databank shard is definitely really high up there. And for that shard specifically as well, it's us really trying to think about what can we make that shard that's not just a replication of something that currently exists as a website. Because we don't want to make a copy of the ship matrix. We don't want to make a copy of the fleet viewer kind of website. We want to make it something that really kind of sings as a shard and adds impact to the way you play the game. So trying to think about what that experience might be that uses data, as Craig said, maybe there's a way for you to say inside the game, tell me of the ships that I own, what ships have at least 18 SCU of cargo that also have room for a dragonfly, something that helps you play the game. That's probably where we'd take that ship databank to. Or again, as Craig mentioned, maybe you target a ship and there's a widget on the combat shard that tells you some key data about that ship, the number of hard points it has, the size of its shield slot, the maximum SCM speed of that ship. So that's where we want to use data for shards, and that's how we want to kind of tackle the ship databank shard as well. So absolutely not paused. Well, it is paused in a sense in that it's kind of waiting on the data-based shard sort of capabilities that we're building, but it's definitely something that we have that we want to keep building towards, and that we have some plans for. So as Craig said, again, to manage expectations, it's not the highest thing on our priority. It's not the thing that we're doing now, but it is absolutely something that we're going to get to in the future, and it's something that we're really excited about.
Great. All right, let's talk about the next topic, and this is an exciting one. What does the future hold for GameGlass? Oh boy. Okay, where do we even want to start with this? Do we want to start with... Actually, you know what we should start with? We should start with our loyal ED fans. You guys have been with us for a long time, and we know that right now it's kind of all Star Citizen, blah, blah, blah. I see you, Commander Cax, in there. We are well aware that ED is much needing an update. We have been trying our best to tackle. I think Andy has probably bugged me about 100 times this year about designing an SLF and SRV shard. And you know, it's funny actually, because we see people doing it in the marketplace already with building their own. But it is something we've always wanted to tackle. And I mean, not just that shard, but the fact is ED absolutely needs a place on the Forge, just like Star Citizen, which means that there's going to be a redesign, and ED is definitely more complicated because we do have those data integrations, and we do want to be able to provide users with the ability to access that data, because that will make it sing. If a user is able to see all the components we use for Elite Dangerous, go into the Forge and say this toggle is connected to the lights, it reads the JSON from the status JSON file, and you all of a sudden have a connected component that you're able to put wherever you want on your own shard. And that's really where ED excels beyond any other game we've worked with so far, is that it has that accessible data. So that's the priority, definitely, is moving that from that old architecture to the new architecture. And again, it's more complicated because of all the data that we need to bring in. And there might be a way of doing it quickly in the short term. But we also, again, we want to create the ideal experience for everyone. So it might be something that we do in tandem with creating new ED components in the Forge that users can start out with at the beginning and maybe create their own stuff while we still have the legacy shards available, or it might just be a complete switch. And I mean, Andy, what do you think about showing some of the designs we had done for?
Yeah, I was just looking in Figma to try and find those. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things we want to.
You went on mute, Andy.
Sorry. Yeah, there's a couple of things we want to do. We definitely want to make. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
The power.
You're good.
Almost went out for a second. All good?
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, there's a couple of things we want to do. As Craig said, we definitely want to bring the Elite Dangerous shards into kind of the Forge architecture to make them customizable with all of the actions in the action manager, and let you move the components around. So that's absolutely a priority for us. We want to start creating some new shards, as Craig said. Yes, SLF and SRV, fleet carrier support, support for some of the new Odyssey features, especially on foot, and some of those activities as well, we definitely want to add. And then a visual update as well is definitely something we want to tackle. So Craig's will hopefully bring up some of the work we've done on some of that too. So There's a lot we want to do with Elite Dangerous in the future. Definitely very, very much on our radar, and something we want to tackle fairly soon. So hopefully we'll definitely have some new shards and some revitalization of the existing shards coming fairly soon. Some of these shards are a bit more complicated because they do pull in a lot more data, both from the JSON file in Elite Dangerous and from third parties as well. So we'll see how kind of those features kind of roll out in the sequence of things, but there's definitely more for Elite Dangerous coming.
So what you're seeing right now is one of the versions that we had for Elite Dangerous actually earlier this year. Again, what everyone needs to remember is that we planned on doing big updates to both Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous before we really fleshed out what we wanted to accomplish with the Forge and allowing users to create anything that they wanted. So what you're seeing right now is one of the early designs we had done when we didn't really have the Forge in mind. It was more so, how can we update and refresh our shards to look, like bring them up to speed and look really, really good moving forward. And this is the result. And you can see, like, there's still some relics of the past here. So initially we had this navigation structure on the left that had a bunch of different shards, but there was a bunch of complications with this, so we decided to get rid of that. So pretend that's not there. We'll move that way over here. Pretend that's not there. And then you can just see just a visual update. So what would be great is that, we could essentially put a lot of these components that you see right now, we could put a lot of these in the Forge without the data integration. That's the great thing about the Forge, is that we don't really require that. We can give you components. They might not be connected in the way we would like to have them connected, but at least it would be something to work with. So as we go through our ED designs, we'll probably use something very similar to what you see here. Obviously, what you see here is not how we want to accomplish navigation in the future, strictly because it's not scalable. Because if we have 10 ED shards and then you have 4 from the marketplace that you really like, how are you supposed to put those all in a top header? It doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of issues with it in its current state, but you can get the idea of what we're trying to accomplish with the visual fidelity and, kind of how we want to refresh these a little bit to make them really pop and work really well with that integration, as well as make them look like they're really part of the game. So that's kind of where we left the ED stuff. Again, our main priority for ED is moving everything from here over to the Forge. Once we can accomplish that and the data integration, we have a lot of decisions we need to make there, but there's still some stuff we can do for ED in the short term that, maybe creating an SLF shard in just the Forge, or, there's a few different things we've tossed around that we can think about. So we haven't forgot about you, I promise. We've just been trying to prioritize the most logical things for us as a business. So,
and I think what we definitely do is, some of these visual designs were done before we had a lot of the capabilities we have in the Forge right now. So I think definitely something to look forward to is, we will go through and do a bit of an immersion and a user experience and an interaction pass on these as well. So how can we use, toggles and sliders and switches and other really cool ways to interact with these shards that aren't just, press button. We definitely want to, try and build more of those immersive interactions as well, using some of the stuff we've got in the Forge and some of the stuff that's coming to the Forge. So we'll incorporate some of those usability and interactions to the new Elite Dangerous shards as well in the future.
Exactly. Cac says he's got, I think you meant 5 tablets running. Props to you. If you have 5 tablets running right now, I've only got 7. So if you're at 5, that's impressive. Yes, those things on my wall are glowing. Those are the, basically they're the, what do you call them? Those fancy lights. I forget what they're called. The triangle ones. The Nanoleaf. Yeah, that's the one. Those are the decor versions of that. Because I'm fancy like that, I guess. Okay. So
let's have a quick chat maybe about some of the Star Citizen shards potentially coming for the future, and then we can dive into some of the new games that we're planning to build some shards for.
Yeah, sounds good. Why don't you take that away?
Cool. So think about our plans for Star Citizen in 2 areas. There is shards for gameplay features that don't currently exist or haven't been rolled out yet. And there's shards for activities that we could build some experiences for that we haven't yet done. So there will absolutely be shards for medical, there'll be shards for salvage, there'll be shards for drone gameplay and component engineering. All of those really cool experiences that they're baking into the game where those systems just aren't available yet. So it is still very much our plans to build shards for those. What those shards look like and how rich those shards are, I suppose. It really depends on what those systems involve and how players interact with those systems. One of the cool things about the partnership is that we do get to hear about some of that stuff that is coming up, so we get some more time to kind of plan around that, which is really cool. But those things are definitely things that are coming up soon. And, more recently we've been having some really interesting discussions with them about some of the vehicle experience things that they're potentially building and ways that GameGlass could potentially add to the way you interact with ships and vehicles in the game. So, we can start to add some really cool things to that as well. As I said, component engineering potentially is a really interesting shard that we could look at hooking into, the state of your components and the state of the subcomponents in those components. So there's potentially some really cool things we could do with that. So those things are definitely coming, but completely dependent on when those systems roll out into the game.
Yeah, and there's a couple things on top of that. When there is new stuff released that we can actually integrate into our shards, we will obviously do that. So one of the things is bombing. And we took a look at bombing actually before we released these shards to see if it was a good fit. And in its current state, it's probably not. It's not at a point where it needs a dedicated operator mode yet. But there was a few other things that they listed there too. Like, for example, remote turrets. Maybe there's an operator mode for remote turrets. There's a few other things as well. and actually, I think there was actually a couple things on the ISC today that they talked about operator modes as well. So we could obviously add those operator modes into the combat shard as we progress. It doesn't necessarily need a dedicated shard, but there might at some point be a dedicated operator mode shard, because we are designing these shards for an alpha game. So you have to keep in mind that the screen is completely full already for combat, and if they release 5 more operator modes, we have to offload something somewhere. So we need to take that and maybe move it to a new shard or do this and that. It's always complicated when it comes to dealing with a game that's in alpha and trying to design stuff for stuff that's not even existing yet. It's fun, if by fun you mean grueling torture, but it is fun. So that's that, and then I think we should talk a little bit about keybinds, and that's absolutely so. One of the things we really loved about our original concept was how easy it was to install it. Now, by easy, I mean like you still need to have a little bit of technical know-how. You need to go download the XML file, drag it into the right directory, all this and that. But as I'd say in the TV ads, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And if that's maybe reading XML files that users have, it's importing and exporting your current actions from a shard. If it's maybe, like as far as the profile goes, like what about like profiles, Andy? Like in-game?
Essentially, what we're talking about here is there are not a lot, but there are some buttons we have on shards that don't have a default keybind in the game. They're really one of the cool things about GameGlass is it gives you a really easy and intuitive and immersive way to use more of the systems that are in the game. Either systems that you don't often use because they're a little bit more niche, but are still really fun to use, or things that kind of don't have a keybind, where maybe you haven't bound it or you don't know it exists even. So we want to try and surface more of those gameplay systems to people because they're really fun to use, and developers put a lot of time and passion into creating them. So, but the problem is some of these just don't have default keybinds to them. So one of the big topics of conversation very recently with Cloud Imperium has been about how we can either add default key bindings to more of the functions that are in the game so that more of the buttons we have on shards work out of the box. I saw someone much earlier on in the chat talk about, where the gameplay kind of works out of the box and how much configuration has to be done. And this is part of the answer to that, is there are always things that at the moment that are just not bound in the game, so we can't make them work magically. You'll have to kind of go in and add a keybind to those things. But if we can have a default keybind, then it'll just work out of the box. The other part of that answer is that we don't know what keybind setups everyone has got, so your keybind setup might be different to what we expect, and in which case you might have to do a bit of kind of lining up of things to make it all work. But yeah, as Craig said, more ways to make more of those keybinds operable. So either default keybinds, or potentially we're talking to them about a GameGlass keybinding profile file that's kind of baked into the game that's really easy to select.
Just like your HOTAS, or like they've got the X52 and a few other different HOTAS profiles. Just alongside those, there'd be a GameGlass profile. We would be able to take ownership of that and bind every single thing that you have in GameGlass. As long as there's enough buttons on your keyboard, which, potentially there might not be. But that's the idea. At least at that point, it's very easy for us to say, okay, all you need to go do is go into Star Citizen, change your keyboard profile to GameGlass. And we don't need to talk about opening the console and typing, I don't remember what the P _ something, rebind keys, GameGlass.xml, or like importing that into the right directory and then having to go change that and all that. It's just, it's too much friction. So if there was a way that we were able to just have a GameGlass profile within the game by default, it would solve a lot of that headache. So that's absolutely something we're discussing with them. And that's probably the most likely outcome out of all of these, at least in the short term, until, we have more conversations about direct integrations. And that's obviously the end game, because keybinds are not a great solution in order for what we're trying to accomplish. If it was a direct integration, you don't need to think about it at all. Makes life a lot easier for everyone. So that's where we'll leave the keybind discussion. And we know that there's a lot of improvement that can be made, and we are absolutely looking into all of those suggestions and all of those ideas in order to accomplish the best experience we possibly can with the least friction.
Request landing and ATC request, that's you'd be surprised how many people request that as a thing. It's and not just for GameGlass, but kind of the community in general. So, that's a really good example of something that would be super, super cool to add. Stay tuned is all I can say on that one.
Stay tuned. Okay, so do we have anything else to talk about for Star Citizen, or can we branch off into new stuff?
Just quickly on the other group of shards for Star Citizen is things that we're also thinking about as well. So things like, fleet command, is there a shard that helps you coordinate a group of players in different ships? And, what are the commands for managing that fleet, and how do you do that? How do you tell what ship to do what thing, or how do you maybe request fuel or request rearming or repair or a landing place for your fighter on what ship? So managing a fleet of ships is definitely something that we're looking to create a shard for. And that, we've got some really cool ideas for doing that don't rely on a direct integration with the game itself. They don't require keybinds or commands, but that's another really good example of a shard that would require some connections between GameGlass users that we would kind of need that next kind of data-based shard kind of platform capability for. So something like that. We're definitely looking at shards for fleet command. We're definitely looking at shards for crew command as well. How do I manage the crew on my one ship, and which crew member is at what station and what are they doing? Do I issue an order for abandoned ship? Do I issue an order for there are borders on my ship? I need to repel borders. So a crew command shard is definitely something that we're looking at. So there are a few other shards like that are about how you play the game and coordinate with other people that aren't necessarily about controlling the game or integrating with the game that we want to tackle as well. They're not so much about game system shards. They're more about kind of game experience shards. It's maybe, we've thought a lot about a shard that lets people, manage, small group tactics about how to plan, if I'm flying into a station or a base, or I'm on foot at a base, which person goes to what place and how do I issue orders and commands to those people as well. So some of those experiences we are looking at building as well, and talking to GameGlass talking to Cloud Imperium about how some of those experiences connect with their vision for the game is really important to us too, as I mentioned earlier. So those are the two kind of groups of shards we're looking at for Star Citizen: game system support and game experience support. And all of those shards are in the mix for us coming, and all of those shards are things that we're talking to Cloud Imperium about for the next phase of shards. That's
right. Great. So which game do you want to tackle first?
Let's do Flight Simulator. That's probably the one that we've had one of the most requests for, and that's something that we can kind of show off a bit more visually as well. So right. Next game coming with a shard for GameGlass is Microsoft Flight Simulator. We're going to have at least 1 to 2, maybe 3 shards for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we're super, super excited about this one. This is one that we think could be both, again, GameGlass's sweet spot, super immersive, really fun to use, but also really useful because of the amount of keybinds and the complexity of some of those interactions in the game.
Yeah, so as I've been telling Andy for a long time now, I don't have the time to learn how to fly a plane. So we need to create a system that allows users to create really immersive and well thought out shards. Just using the Forge, and that's what we're planning on doing here. One of the different actually we'll show this as well a little bit later, but one of the different component types that we have, and you see them in Star Citizen already, is called a panel. And a panel is basically just like a background that's expandable in order to show in the background where you overlay content on top of it. So for example, this little part here that you can see on my screen that I've got selected, all these panels with the screws on them, and the labels potentially, if you wanted to edit those too, you'd be able to move these around back and forth on the Forge and set them to whatever width you'd want. And then same with these are just a panel as well. So you'd be able to modify these as well to make them look however you wanted, so you could add whatever labels you wanted. And then of course all the buttons are customizable as well. That's what we do. So same with all these toggles. They have up and down states. Toggles is obviously another component type that we're adding to the Forge library.
Craig, do you want to launch the interactive version of this, and you can kind of toggle things on and off, and people can kind of see how that stuff works if you just start the prototype?
I didn't even know that you did that, so this is news to me. Oh, look at that. Look, well done, Andy.
So what Craig's talking about here is essentially, this is kind of a slightly different type of shard that we're looking at doing. So as Drake just mentioned then, this type of shard is useful not just for Microsoft Flight Simulator as one specific game, but for any game or many games that kind of has very similar kind of interaction styles. So what we're looking at doing is having a couple of different shards for this. One of what Craig's talking about here is we don't have a great name for it yet. We'll come up with a better term for it, but like a template shard, where essentially here's a whole collection of toggles and switches and dials, and we'll have a few more that we add to this as well in the future. And rather than setting it up for one specific game or one specific activity within that game, we just say, here's all the really cool switches and dials and labels and panels and backgrounds. You can now take this and change the layout and tweak it and move things around and change the colors and change the labels and the actions and make it work for whatever game you want to use these interactions for. So it could be Microsoft Flight Simulator, it could be DCS, it could be World of Tanks, it could be anything that kind of really kind of uses this sort of more realistic sort of set of interactions. So that kind of template shard idea is one of the shards that we're looking to release really soon. Saying that though, we do definitely want to create at least one or two shards for Microsoft Flight Simulator specifically that are pre-configured and pre-set up for the way people fly in that particular game. So there would, for example, be what I've been saying, kind of the beginner or the basic shard for a Microsoft Flight Simulator that has some interactions and some controls pre-labeled and the keybinds pre-set up for flying a small plane in Microsoft Flight Simulator, where perhaps you don't have rudders, you don't have two joysticks and a throttle, and the way a beginner person would fly a small plane in Flight Simulator is very different to the way a very advanced user would fly a large plane for Flight Simulator, where they've got some of those other devices. So those shards will be very different. The advanced shard and the basic shard would be quite different. So, setting them up in those specific cases is something we want to do. So there will still be specific shards for Flight Simulator, but there will also be kind of this template shard where you can just pick it up and customize it and move things around and delete things and make it work for whatever kind of flight sim game that you have. But the opposite of that is also true, that we absolutely will look at, and I've just fairly recently, there's a ton of keybinds for DCS, there's a ton of keybinds for those games, and we would look at doing something similar for that as well. We would have, again, a template that really suits that game, but again, specific pre-configured shards for DCS and X-Plane and some of these other experiences as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that brings us into kind of another philosophical conversation about like what we want to accomplish with GameGlass, and there's two very, very different approaches to shards, and there's one user base that just wants to buy premium shards. They just want whatever makes sense for their game. But there's a lot of people out there that like to customize something and they want to make it their own, and that's where really the power of the Forge comes in. So if we offer, as Andy loves to put it, the Lego bricks in order to accomplish creating something beautiful easily, then we absolutely want to be able to provide that for users. So it's just a matter of going into our component library, dragging these elements out of the component library, putting them on here, and then just setting your labels and setting your actions, and then all of a sudden you've got a beautifully designed shard. And we want to make that easy and accessible for everybody. And that's kind of the goal with the Forge, which is it powers the technology in order to create everything. But some people just want something created and that's the glory of the marketplace as well. Is you can go find stuff from all different games there. There's some interesting games that we've seen already be submitted to the marketplace. So it's very extensible in that sense. So we're really excited about adding these very skeuomorphic designs, the more realistic ones. So it's going to be really fun to play with this and see what everyone can do with it. Actually, speaking of that, we'll talk a little bit about the Star Citizen components and the Forge itself. Just maybe at the end of this section. Maybe we just dive into the next one now, Andy.
Yep. So Microsoft Flight Simulator specifically with kind of a template shard coming up really, really soon. As you can see, the components are pretty much ready to go. Craig will do a bit of a design director, product director pass on those, but then we'll get them into the Forge. We'll get those shards ready, and we're really hoping to have that really, really soon. We don't like giving any dates at all, but I can say it is coming up really, really soon.
Yeah, we've learned our lessons from that. No more dates. No more dates. Okay.
So Flight Simulator, and again, kind of coming along with that, definitely looking at DCS and some of those other games as well. But Flight Simulator specifically is the next one coming up. But alongside Flight Simulator, we really wanted to kind of branch out a little bit. And a game that's been kind of near and dear to Craig and I, and some other members on the team kind of playing as well, has been Final Fantasy. So we've been playing, everyone's been getting into this as well, which has been kind of pretty cool. And the need for a shard in Final Fantasy is really interesting, and it's really different to the need that a typical GameGlass shard might serve, because it's not about controlling the game. It's not about the keybones you need during combat or during when you're walking around kind of questing and doing other things. So it's not the direct control experience that a lot of our other a lot of our other shards are. It's about how we can make some of the other commands more useful. So what we want to try and do is give you an easier way to do things that you would otherwise have to have hotbars full of commands for. So things like switching between jobs or switching between glamour plates or outfits. We can bind to some macros for those things and make it really easy to switch to those without having, again, a whole hotbar full of this stuff. But it's also some really useful things that are kind of combat and action related that aren't about controlling your character. So it might be things like announcing a raid mechanic by tapping a button, or potentially even combining some of those raid announcements with some of the action delays we have inside the Forge and the action manager, where you can sync up those announcements to happen automatically based on timers for those raid mechanics as well. So it's emotes as well. It's dances. There is over 200 dances in Final Fantasy. It's all the emotes. It's all the dances. It's all the yell commands and the say commands. It's job switching. So it's a utility shard. It's something that makes just playing the game, apart from controlling your character, a little bit easier, a little bit more fun as well. So that's a fairly simple shard that we think can add a bit to the experience of playing it without having to control the game itself. And we'll do a bit more work on the visuals for it and some of the interactions that are used, but we're really excited for where we can take, shards for games like Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft and Guild Wars and some of these other games that aren't so heavily based on controlling your character directly, but we still think there's a really interesting, unique, and compelling place for a shard for those games.
Yeah, and one of the great things too is that, again, these components, just because we have them for Final Fantasy doesn't mean you need to use them for Final Fantasy. These panels are expandable and you can use them for whatever shard you want. So that's the whole glory of the Forge, is that we've got a couple panels here. Whatever content we create can go into the Forge for you to create something new. And that's what's great about it. So let's go here. And what's next on the agenda?
So from there, what we're looking at doing is definitely more support for more simulator style games. So looking at as I said, at DCS, at Euro Truck Simulator, at Farming Simulator, at X-Plane, a lot of those kinds of games. So more support for those kinds of games. We really want to go back to EVE Online. That was something that we looked at really early on, and I've been kind of revisiting that from a gameplay perspective. There's a ton we can do for games like EVE, and I saw someone mention X4 as well. So we're really looking at this month and next month and into early next year, really very, very rapidly expanding the number of games we have shards for, premium shards for, and the number of components that we have in the Forge to support those games, which is probably a great segue into getting components into the Forge for Star Citizen and for some of these other games too, if you want to head back to that one, Craig.
Yeah, do you want to show the library components? Like just the file that we've, the glow. Okay, let's do that. Let me just get to it and then I'll switch it over.
So one of the things that, and this was one of the, getting back to kind of the feedback, one of the pieces of feedback we heard about the official Star Citizen shards is they weren't as flexible or as editable or customizable as people would have liked. And one of the reasons we chose to do that is we want to get to a place where you can delete components and move components around for any of the shards that you have. But the problem with that is we didn't have all the components in the component library to help you do that in a really organic way. Because if you delete a component without that component being in the component library for you to add back, your shard's kind of hosed. So we erred on the side of locking things down to give people a stable kind of good experience. But definitely what we want to do is add components into the component library for all of these shards. So it's, for example, going back and adding all of the components from the official shards into the component library, so you can use them to customize the shards that you have, or to use them even to build your own completely custom shards. So radically expanding the number of components that are in that component library is a huge priority for us.
Andy, should we just talk about what our plans are for GlassPass versus, I'm sure a lot of people will have that question on what the payment model looks like for the Forge itself.
Yep. So the basic idea here is GlassPass for us has always been about giving everyone who's got GlassPass all the things. It's just meant to be a simple subscription, and you get all the shards, you get all the components, you get all the things. You don't have to pick and choose, you just get it all. So that's what we want to do. So if you're a GlassPass member, you'll have all of these components that Craig is going through now, and all of the components that we add in the future. So you get every premium shard, obviously, but automatically added to the component library inside the Forge for you will be all of these components. So you can see all of these are all of the toggles and dials and buttons and switches that we use to build Star Citizen. All of these will be added to the component library for GameGlass members to use to build their own shards and customize their shards with. So all of the separators, the panels, the hero components. Hero components are interesting. Those are the kind of pre-configured chunks of interactions, like the shield component, the quantum travel component. You know, you can't build that out of pieces. We just give that to you as an entire chunk that you can kind of use and put it on any shard that you want. So all of that stuff is coming to GlassPass usage. That gets added to the component library for you. If you are not a GlassPass member, the way that will work is you won't see those. You'll see those components in your component library, but you won't be able to add them to a shard. And if you go to the marketplace and go to add a shard that has those components in it, you'll be able to see it on the marketplace, but you'll see a message saying that this shard has GlassPass only components in it, so you need to be a GlassPass member in order to add it to the library. But that's only for shards that have GlassPass only components to it. You'll still be able to add shards that are free.
Yeah, I'm just going to hop over to what that's going to look like because it's just a good way to visualize it. So the idea here is that the component library will look something like this versus right now where there's just a buttons section and it shows everything. That's not obviously how we want it to work in the future. There needs to be some filtering and categorization of all of these components. So we've got all of our buttons, toggles, hero components, text labels, panels, dividers, and decorations. And this will be in the first version that we release of this component library. And ETA-wise, very soon with this. We're getting really close to adding all this stuff in. So you just click on one of these sections here, buttons, toggles, hero components, whatever, and it would show all the elements I just showed on the previous screen. Obviously, if you have no recent components, then it would just say that. And then, something like, it would look like this, basically, if you didn't have GlassPass, it would just show you what that button or the component would look like, and if you want to upgrade, you can go do it there. So that's kind of what our vision is, at least for the Forge itself, for creation of shards. And we'll dive. There's some actually great questions on that already, on the marketplace and on shard creation and all this other stuff that we'll tackle in the Q&A, which is coming right up. I think I showed all these. Yeah. There's actually, so Andy started going over the old Star Citizen 1.5, he's called it, is the designs we showed last year, I think. when we said we were redoing the Star Citizen ones, and then we ended up signing an agreement with CIG, and then we redid them all over again. So we've gone through a lot of iterations of Star Citizen designs. But we liked what we did. It's just we want to throw that in, and just the more content, the better. So that's kind of where that sits. But let's
Cool.
see.
So I think that's most of what we wanted to cover for the new stuff. So Microsoft Flight Simulator, Final Fantasy, more support for more flight sims, DCS X-Plane, EVE Online, and then kind of branching out into some other games. But the huge focus for us this month and next, especially kind of setting ourselves up for next year, is expanding that component library that Craig just showed you there, and then packing it just with tons and tons of really awesome components. And again, that's the Lego brick stuff I like to talk about. The more we can give you guys just tons of really awesome Lego bricks, really great components that just look really cool out of the box, that are in matching sets and that you can mix and match, the easier it is for you guys to create really killer shards. And because we use that same system to create shards ourselves, it makes it so much faster and easier for us to create those premium shards as well. So that's a huge focus for us, is more stuff in the component library, and that lets us do more games and more shards, and it just gets faster and faster for us to create them, and more flexible and more powerful for you guys with more of those Lego bricks.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Super Dave, you can still buy premium shards. That a subscription isn't required in order to buy a premium shard. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit. There's a couple questions that kind of relate to what you just asked, so we'll kind of get into that as we go along here.
So shall we do that then? Shall we do some Q&A? And we've got a ton of really interesting questions, so let's dive into those for the last bit here.
Let's be honest, I want to hear Chad's voice. He's just been sitting there in silence for an hour and a half.
Yeah. There is a reason why I'm silent for these things until this point, because unlike Craig and Andy, I can't tell you all about what we're planning on doing, how we're going to do it. What I pay attention to is the community. Every single email, I see it, I read it, I respond to it. I know all of what you are saying as the community, and day by day, internally, I'm always bringing up all those things to the devs. We're making decisions. Are we going to do this? Are we going to do this? Are we going to focus on this thing? Are we going to focus on this thing? Everything that you say, I'm repeating internally. So that's my function here.
Chad is our life support.
Yeah, in some sense. So, the silent life support. Okay, so some of the big questions, I just want to knock these two out right away. Are we ever going to be looking at support for Macs in the future?
Oh.
Yep. We'd love to do a Mac client. Can't say when, but we'd love to do it. But I can't say when.
Yeah, there's no reason we can't do it. It's just, 90% of gaming is done on PCs. It's really hard for us to prioritize something like that when the vast majority of people will have a gaming rig versus, the M1s, I have to say, they've done a really good job with them. It might be in the future that Macs are, a potential gaming platform, but for now, it's mostly PC. So, but there's other things too, right? Like you could create a shard for... if you're into design, you could create a shard for Photoshop or Figma or whatever, right? So, So
it's see more people create shards for the Adobe Creative Suite or OBS or other things. So, letting people use GameGlass for that on their Macs, it's definitely going to be something that we want to do more and more.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have a question from Dave from Nevada. I've been waiting to get this one out here. Especially with the hero elements, we don't have the same level of action customization as we do on all the other buttons. Are we planning to keep things as they are right now? Are we planning to expand more customization to some of those? Or are we keeping them locked down, right where they are because of more of the animations and everything else that we've got going into those?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because on one side, hero components are meant to be that visual pizzazz, basically, that you'd see. And we've always tried to have some of that visual pizzazz, which is apparently something I just made up today, on each one of our shards. And that's really important for us, is creating that that feeling when you look at a shard. It's like, okay, there's something that catches my eye that's really cool to play with. And hero components are very complicated to both design and develop. So I would say that in the immediate future, no, there's not going to be any not customization, but there's not going to be a way to create your own hero component. Though my definition of a hero component and everyone else's might differ, because when you're saying hero component, you might mean I press a button and it does this to this component, does this to that component, hides it, then shows an animation, which probably would be relatively simple to do. What I'm saying is from the components we've designed from scratch, at that level, there probably wouldn't be a way to create something in the Forge by yourself. At least not at this immediate point in our basically just in our it's just not going to happen anytime soon. But
sure, and the question more so focused on the action editor, even like putting sound effects in, putting more advanced keybinds in than the defaults that are populated in some of those.
Yeah, and that's definitely a possibility. The reason we kind of limited those action capabilities on our hero components was because if you added actions in the wrong places for those, it would really mess things up quite a bit. So we wanted to create something on the sidebar that was more set in stone. But we're open to feedback, and if users want something where it can be customized more, then we're happy to provide that, because it's we can revert between the two systems. So we're definitely listening, and if that's the case, then we can definitely make some changes.
Sure. All right. Let's see. One question from Not Real Dan in today's chat. Can we duplicate existing shards in the Forge? Say I import a community one, we'd like to make copies with various custom changes on unique copies. Is there a duplicate function? I haven't been able to find if it exists. So could you tell us a little bit about why we've restricted that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about focus, and again, we had to get our shards live and the marketplace live and the component library and all the dashboard and the front end and the marketplace and all this other stuff all together at once. And there's absolutely some work we need to do as far as so really our main concern here, it's not about duplicating shards, it's about taking someone else's work and plagiarizing it. Basically, that is our biggest concern right now, and we want to try to find a good way of tackling that. What we don't want to see is a user copying a user shard from the marketplace, editing a couple things, and then re-uploading it. So that's like our biggest concern right now. It's absolutely something we want users to be able to do. It's just that we need to work out some kinks before we kind of allow that interaction, I think.
Right. And there was one earlier, and I'm not going to try to pronounce this. Well, I actually am, but Nyangdunma. To Andy's question for feedback, redesign philosophy. The main thing is to be clear about where GG sits. I'm new to GlassPass, and I have not realized that there was such a strong requirement to program for use. I'm happy to do so, but was ignorant of the fact that GG is not shipped fully ready to use, which is kind of a little bit more of a drift from our legacy shards where we're at right now at the Forge for different reasons.
Yeah, so one of the things we did with the legacy shard was we provided a keybind file that was all set up and ready to go. So as long as you installed that file and kind of got it connected inside Star Citizen, all the buttons would work. But there was still that step that kind of had to be done. What we've done now is almost kind of gone the other direction and said, well, we're not going to require you to set up any file. We're going to work with whatever the defaults are, but because the Forge now exists and it's so easy to just select any button and change the keybinds for it, you can customize it to whatever you want it to be. So it makes it more flexible for people that have got some keybinds they want to use rather than being forced to use the keybind file that we provide. But it also, we understand it doesn't solve the problem that I highlighted earlier, where there are some commands that just aren't bound by default. And at the moment, we can't magically make those work. If there's no keybind inside the game, when you press a button that does Control L, if that's not connected to something in the game, that button it'll do nothing. So that's something we're always trying to balance, as Craig was highlighting before. We have to try and balance providing lots of cool functions on the shards with what the game lets you do out of the box. And the way we've kind of gone about that was, erred on the side of cool things to do, and then relied on the Forge being really easy for people to add those keybinds to the game as they go. But we definitely agree that we can do more to make that more apparent, to make it clearer for people where they have to do that setup, and where they have to kind of tweak that gap to make GameGlass work the way they expect it to work. That's good feedback.
All right, we got one by Commander Singer. Can icons be included in the shards instead of just words?
Yes, there's an entire shard library that you can use, icon library that you can use to add icons to most components. I think pretty much every component or many components. Tons and tons of icons in there. You can search for them. You can add your own. You can change the colors of those components. Super easy to do. I think Craig's gonna do a demo for you now.
Icon right here. Click on that. Browse icon library, and then you can search for whatever you want. Rocket. Change that. Add a rocket there. You can get rid of the text. You can have a rocket now, and you want it centered. You want to change the size of it and maybe the color. And there you go. You have an icon button.
There you go.
Okay, and Tyrone had asked, will there be a partnership with Frontier as well, so the Elite players get the same love as Star Citizen? This is one that a few users repeated the same question.
We'd love to. We're always open and we're always up for conversations with developers. As I mentioned, we've had a lot of other conversations with other game developers. We'd love to. We think we can do some really amazing things with Elite Dangerous, with a partnership with Frontier. Very, very early approaches to them before we were at the stage where we're at now. We kind of stopped pressing them when we chose to focus a bit more on our platform. We wanted to wait until we had more maturity there before we went back and revisited it. But now might be the time to reach back out. So absolutely. If we could hook that up, then we absolutely would.
Real quick, I just want to address Steve B. Dancer. We actually went over all of the shard navigation improvements we're going to be making earlier this stream. If you were not watching before, just watch the replay and all your questions will be answered about navigation.
Okay, Saltminer asked a few questions. I'm going to highlight one of them. Specifically, do we have a vision or an intention, at least, with an assumption that we are able to get an API from Star Citizen? Would we want to build out some shards that are literally in-game panels, one for one?
That would be amazing.
I don't know whether we would specifically say we would want to build ship panels one for what is in the ships, but we absolutely have plans for what we could do with an API, and we've talked to Cloud Imperium about it, and they've got some really cool ideas as well. So yes, we definitely have some really cool things we would do if we had API access. But I can't guarantee that thing would be literally the ship panels one for one, but it would be obviously super cool stuff.
So just real quick on that, just a little bit of technology stuff. The way we're connecting your device with your computer is via WebRTC. It allows all kinds of stuff to be transferred immediately between two different devices, and one of those things would be video. So the fact is, what would have to happen would be any company, CIG, Frontier, whoever decided to integrate this in that specific way, they would need to render an additional camera for whatever we're looking at, be it the MFD or this or that. Potentially, it could be up to 5 or 6 if you have that many tablets, which is actually that's overhead for your graphics card. And then we would need to figure out a way to interact with those that's not Maybe it's like an overlay on top of those MFDs in order to interact with it, but there's quite a bit of work that goes into that. So we definitely can't promise it will be a one-to-one. You see your MFD on the ship, here it is, you can interact with it the same way. There's a lot of complications there. So I'm not saying they can't be overcome. I'm just saying that there's a lot more to it than just being like, hey, I'll take this and plop it there.
All right, we've got one here from Alien Zen, and his is more of a question of pose your best argument here. He says, my HOTAS are getting old. They're used to have given me more fun in game, and here GameGlass comes along with bundles of GlassPass and on touchscreens. What would be your argument to convince me to use your technology rather than buy a new Virpil set, for example? Do you see GameGlass as something that could be a better choice?
I have two arguments, two very, very simple arguments for you. One is that we don't cost $400.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. And two is that our switches and buttons are labeled. So those are two big selling points. That's actually one of the reasons GameGlass was created in the first place, was because keyboards not labeled. My joystick and throttle not labeled. I can't remember the majority of the buttons. Even when I have them bound on my HOTAS, I can't remember them. So I wanted something a little bit easier. So those would be my two arguments. I don't know. Both of you probably have other arguments too.
I'd probably add that if I'm to be honest, sometimes we're maybe not the best choice for that. If what you want is tactile and what you want is very physical, then a joystick or a throttle is the choice for you. You know, we're not tactile and we're not physical like that. But yeah, as all the things that Craig just said, as Steve mentioned as well, being customizable, those are probably the cool things that we want to do. You know, I've got a thing in my head, and I think I pitched it to Craig kind of a long while ago. You know, there's a digital throttle product that we could make, where essentially it puts a throttle on your tablet or on your phone that you can kind of slide kind of up and down, kind of the way a throttle works. So who knows? Maybe we can do kind of something that is a bit more, you know, throttle-like as an object, but it wouldn't be physical the same way that those products are. So you know, they have their pros and cons, but cheap, customizable, and labeled.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the other things we kicked around for the longest time is if we can add haptic feedback. But actually, honestly, it seems like most of our users who have a HOTAS or throttle, tool sticks, whatever, oftentimes GameGlass sits right there in the middle. Each one has its place. So.
Yeah, and haptics is something we want to add. The problem with haptics is it's not universal. Playing a sound, you know, for like, you know, press a button and it plays a sound on your PC, that's universal. Pressing a button is universal. Having a swipe action is universal. But haptics, not every single tablet has a haptic engine. So we need to really think out that. And absolutely we would love to have that. It's just a little bit more thought needs to go into it than just, you know, releasing it to everybody.
So haptics are literally on our roadmap. That's definitely something that we really have concrete plans to do. As Craig said, unfortunately, it won't work for everyone, but it would be, you know, a lot of devices do have it. So we definitely want to look at doing it. But yeah, again, as Craig said as well, a lot of people have a joystick or a throttle and GameGlass. So sometimes it's not about one or the other. It's about how they can complement each other.
All right, I got two questions here left. First, Andy, look behind you. Hyperspace Narwhal, is it still going to happen? That's the question.
Yes. It's very much very much near and dear to my heart. So the game design for it is largely done. The mechanics for it are done. The animation and the artwork is all done. Your build for the game exists, and it's all thanks, Craig, for showing them the painting.
You're welcome.
No, definitely we still want to do it. The issue we had with it was more about performance than anything else. It just wasn't smooth and quick enough as a gameplay experience on enough of the tablets that we know our users use. So definitely want to do it. It's a passion project for me. I want to get it out there. We're going to essentially have to go back and rebuild it we built it in Unity, so we're going to have to rebuild it out of Unity. It's not rocket surgery to do it. It's about priorities. I still want to do it. We'll get it out there soon. It'll happen, I promise.
All right. Okay, so here's the big one then. Super Senka 4508. If we make our own shards, is there any plans for monetization of the custom shards? Is that on our roadmap?
Okay, that's a can of worms.
Yeah.
So how we always envisioned the marketplace to be was a place, it's called a marketplace for a reason. And right now it doesn't seem like it. Like right now we could stay store and it would still make sense because it's just us selling stuff. That's not the way we foresee it in the future. We see it more of like an app store where users are able to create really amazing shards using our technology, and they're able to sell them on the GameGlass marketplace. So that's absolutely something we would like to do, and I know that some people are holding out their amazing designs and everything they've accomplished using the Forge in order for that to be available. The fact is it's not coming anytime soon. It's absolutely something that is going to be one of our pillars of our platform and our technology. And we obviously also want to support the people that are making great content for GameGlass and the Forge itself. So that's one way of really, really allowing people to spend their time creating something exactly that they want, sharing with it, and then seeing a net benefit from that as well.
Yeah, so definitely something we want to do. Definitely something that we want to, really build an ecosystem that encourages and rewards and supports creators of really amazing shards. So as Craig said, very much, absolutely part of our radar. We're pre-planning for it already. There are conversations about it already. We want to get there, but we really want to make sure we do it right, and we really want to make sure we make it an experience that really, as I said, supports and enables and rewards and encourages the creators and makes it fair and amazing for them, and makes it really easy for our users to grab those shards and to get all the things around it that would need to be there, as all the support for it, for those shards, and the tracking and the versioning and all of that stuff that kind of goes into making it a great experience for everybody in that process. And yes, that's a Prusa Mark III, best 3D printer ever.
Yeah, and real quick for Not Real Dan, so how would monetization of custom shards mesh with GlassPass and the idea that GlassPass members get everything? That's still a work in progress. I think there's a lot of ways to go about it. There's different ways we've even thought about it via usage metrics, and maybe there's like token currency, or there's a bunch of different ways we could address that problem. We haven't come to any conclusions yet on that, but it's absolutely something we would need to figure out before we release that functionality. So just know that we have thought about that, and obviously we want to, if you had a GlassPass, for example, and you used or used a token or used whatever in order to get a community member's premium shard, then the creator is rewarded for that as well. It can't just be they don't get rewarded for GlassPass usage. So we definitely make sure that was fleshed out.
All right. So that's a wrap with what I've got for the questions here. Of course, everyone continue to post your questions in Discord. We have dedicated area there for all your feedback, anything that you're thinking would be something cool to see on the platform, anything that you think we could do. We read those. We do we do seriously talk about everything that you guys bring up. So
GameGlass wouldn't be where it is if it wasn't for the community. And that's what was so difficult about designing these Star Citizen shards, is we did it in black box. Typically our design methodology is more, we design something, get feedback on it, and then redo it and make sure it fits with everybody's vision. With the Star Citizen ones, we didn't want to announce anything quite yet, so we wanted to announce stuff and have stuff completed for when we announce the partnership with them. There's one quick question I did want to address regarding the emotes shard. And so originally the emote shard in the social shard for Star Citizen actually had nothing bound by default. In Legacy, we bound everything, and you used our XML file in order to execute that command. We switched to the new version with the Forge, and we originally had nothing bound by default. Then I changed everything again in order to use slash commands instead of direct keybinds. And while everything is available to keybind in the game, it's an issue with keeping a contained XML file. And that's just something, obviously, we talked about earlier, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Some people have no problems with it. Some people do have problems with it. For some reason, it works for some people, not others, based on your network or probably your device performance. But the ideal situation would be, again, maybe like either a direct integration or a GameGlass profile that you can select, and then we can bind all those out of the gate. So that kind of answers that question there. And there's another one here from Cyber Taniwa. Understand you want pre-built keybind integration for ease of use. Will there ever be a way to export a keybind XML file for our custom created shards? Yeah, so this is a really good point. And actually, there's been quite a few mentions of this that we've noticed in Discord, and I think it's a great idea. I would have no problem with users giving whoever wants to download their shard, because it's on the marketplace, the ability to upload their custom XML file, and then when a user goes and adds that shard to the library, they can also have a download button for that XML file, maybe some instructions or whatever, and then just use that, and everything works out of the box. That's not a monumental task at all. So I think that's really, really, really good feedback, and that's exactly what we're looking for, is stuff like that to really help us make this the best product it can be. So that's great. 100%, I think we should do that, and I'll be bugging everybody about it, because I'm looking at this last week is for me. It's been all about quick wins, and I think that's one of those quick wins that can be really helpful. So absolutely is the answer. That's a great idea. I think that's it. Is that it? I think that's it. Watch us get 100 more questions tomorrow in Discord. Honestly, all of you, thank you for showing up. And I know this is typically, we don't do streams this late. Typically we do it on the weekend where all of our EU folks can be around as well. But we wanted to just get this out there as quick as possible. We know a lot of people have been asking about like Ship Data Bank and Discover. We know we had a lot to talk about, and we wanted to just get this out there as quick as we could. So we really appreciate you all coming out and spending time with us. We appreciate the fact that you waited 20 minutes for us to show up because of technical issues. But I promise I'm going to save all the settings I have right now, and the next stream will be flawless. Promise. And
so look, thank you everyone for coming out. As Craig said, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys. The support and the passion and the energy and the excitement has literally been what has made GameGlass possible, and it really encourages us as well. So thank you for all of that. As Chad mentioned, all of the feedback, we listen to all of it, we read all of it, so keep sending that through. If there are games you want us to support, if there are features you want, if there are buttons you want, if there are visual styles that you want for those components, tell us, let us know. We're listening to all of that stuff. So thank you so much for coming along. Thank you very much for listening to it all. And we're glad you're enjoying what we're building for everyone, because we're having a blast doing it.
Love it. And thank you, Chad, for the wonderful moderation. We're gonna keep bringing you in these, Chad. It's so much easier with you here.
Thanks, Chad.
All right, everybody, take care, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take it easy. Bye now.